wasn't quite the trip that we had originally planned, but we ran into some engine difficulties, which caused us to have to adjust our plans and make some repairs. Small issue, impeller. I had the part on board, but when we were about to shove off on yesterday morning, just gotta watch where I'm going here. I noticed it was very early. We got up, we had to make an early departure to make our transit through Active Pass, and I noticed that the engine wasn't pumping water, or it was pumping some water, but not to the volume that I would have expected. It was irregular and it was low volume. So I suspected that it was an issue with me leaving the seacock open overnight. Usually I close the seacock, which there's varying opinions on whether or not you need to close your seacocks, but most people don't, right, from what I gather, and they're just fine. But I was taught by the last owner of the boat to always close the seacock when I finish the voyage, so that's what I do, and then I just open it before we're gonna go. So in this case, I hadn't done that. I went to fire up the engine. The engine runs great. One thing about this boat, it's got a really nice, it was repowered in 2009 with a Yanmar 30 horsepower. The model is 3YM30, and it's only got less than 800 hours on it. So it's a very reliable engine. But as with all mechanical systems, you have to do the maintenance. And one of the only things I didn't check, because it had been working good, and I fired it up several times over the last few weeks as I was getting prepared for the trip, always pumping water good. I hadn't serviced or inspected impeller. And so anyways, long story short, or long story long, we got up early in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, to do our transit. It was a bit stressful and a bit harried. I wasn't as prepared as I wanted to be with a few things, but I was ready to go, and we were about to push off. Like I said, it wasn't pumping water, so I had to call it off. I was pretty disappointed for both me and Dean, but what we ended up discovering later on, when I tried to prime the system with some water into the strainer, still wasn't pumping water. And the last rewind to the last attempt to start it in the morning, I had noticed no water flow and a lot of white smoke, like exhaust smoke, which is not irregular. So that's when I called it off and I said no. So then when I went to restart it, no water was pumping. I primed the system and there was no water. So I was like, okay, well, what's the problem? So first thought was the impeller. So I opened up the water pump, and sure enough, the impeller had lost a blade, and I was so lucky because the blade of the impeller was still in the pump cavity, so I didn't lose any pieces into the system, which meant that we didn't have like a potential blockage in the system, which would have been a much more extensive repair. So I had a spare impeller on board. I was able to install the new impeller. And then we thought, okay, no problem, we should be fine, and we just went about our day. And then I wanted to wait until, or I wanted to test the motor, obviously, after I installed it, but I waited a little while. We went for lunch and stuff, came back, because I just assumed that that was the issue. Started it, and then I noticed there was very little. Primed it and everything, did everything, and no, it was still not producing water. So I was at the point where I was about to dive into the, like, put the wetsuit on and jump in the water and inspect the intake, because I could tell that it was not getting water into there was no water coming in. Anyways, I re-lubed the gasket on the strainer, re-lubed the strainer, made sure that the strainer was clean, made sure there was a good tight air fit. No luck. And then before I just jumped in the water, I thought, Dean actually said, why don't you check online and see if there's any ideas online. So I went online and went through the checklist, a bunch of the stuff that I'd already tested. But one thing a guy had mentioned was when he replaced his impeller, he would start it up and immediately he'd prime the strainer, open the seacock, fire it up, and immediately blip it to 2,000 RPM just to give it a little bit more suction on the strainer. So I did it, and boom, it just started spitting water. Spit out a huge, big batch of green shit. So I don't know if there was something up in the water outtake, but yeah, got her going, producing tons of water flow. And unfortunately, we were going to go across the strait and do our crossing to Montague Harbor today, but the wind kicked up in the middle of the night. It was blowing 22 knots all night long. Blew 20 to 22 knots all the way up until 9 a.m. We needed to leave at about 5 a.m. to get across for about a 9 a.m. Passage through Acton Pass. So we made the decision the night before, because I knew the weather, that if it was blowing hard in the morning, we would just prime and prep to return to our home marina, Fraserwood Marina. Which, you know, for us, like, everybody who has huge dreams and ideas when they're getting into cruising and sailing, like, you know, big trips, people start talking about going around the world before they've even bought a boat. But you know what I've learned with my limited experience with boating and sailing is I've owned the 22-foot sailboat back before Dean and I were married, and then I've owned a 24-foot powerboat, and we owned a 14-foot inflatable with like a 20 horsepower engine that we used for crabbing. And then finally we've got the 32-foot Bayfield, which is a full keel cruising sailboat. And what I've learned is that it's best to take baby steps. There's no rush to learn. You learn every time you go out, you learn something. You get more familiar with the boat. You get more familiar with the systems. As a crew, you get better at dealing with problems, and you get to learn how to communicate with each other in stressful situations. And the upside of it was that we spent a couple of nights at Steveston, which were awesome. It was a great time, especially the evenings were really nice. It was because it was hot during the day, but at night it was really cool and nice. My only regret is that if we had just made that our mission, we would have probably enjoyed it more, because we were going to bed fairly early in order to get up early for our transits both days. So, but it was all good, and we're heading back to Fraserwood now. We're trying to catch the last of the floods, the tides, so that we can run against the Fraser, hopefully get a little bit. It feels like we're not going very fast right now, so it might take us a little longer than expected. But we have a full fuel tank and we have provisions on board and we're in good condition. We had a good sleep. So that's it for this little trip. Some would call it a bit of a failure, but I would say that it's taking lemons and making lemonade. And we had a good time, so that's a success. All right, well, thanks for tuning in. I'll talk to you again next time. Have a good one. Bye for now.